Nobody knew Willie Nelson was secretly America's biggest anonymous donor until a dying man revealed the truth. What he said about Willie's generosity made the entire country cry. But to understand the magnitude of Willie Nelson's secret charity, you first need to understand where it came from. You need to know about a hungry little boy in Abbott, Texas, who learned what it meant to have nothing and who promised himself that if he ever had something, he would share it with anyone who needed it. This isn't a story about publicity stunts or tax write-offs. This is the story of a man who spent 50 years secretly giving away his fortune, one family at a time, one crisis at a time, one act of kindness at a time. And nobody knew the full scope of what Willie Nelson had done until Robert Mitchell was dying. Abbott, Texas, 1940. Willie Nelson was 7 years old, and he was hungry. Not the kind of hungry you get when dinner's an hour late. The kind of hungry that gnaws at your stomach for days, that makes you weak and dizzy, that keeps you awake at night. The Depression had hit small-town Texas hard, and the Nelson family was barely surviving. Willie's grandparents, William and Nancy Nelson, were raising Willie and his sister Bobby after their parents had essentially abandoned them. William Nelson worked odd jobs when he could find them, but there were more bad days than good ones. Nancy took in washing and mending, but it was never enough to keep the family fed consistently. Willie remembered walking through town and seeing other families struggling just as much. The Hendersons had lost their farm. The Martinez family was living in their car. Old Mrs. Patterson was eating one meal a day so her grandchildren could have two. But Willie also remembered something else. He remembered the day a stranger knocked on their door. The man was well-dressed, driving a nice car, clearly not from Abbott. He handed William Nelson an envelope and said, "I heard your family might need some help getting through the winter." Inside the envelope was $200 in cash, more money than the Nelson family had seen at one time in months. "Who are you?" William asked. The man smiled. "Just someone who remembers what it's like to be hungry. Take care of your grandchildren." He left without giving his name. The Nelson family never saw him again. But Willie never forgot that moment. He never forgot how it felt to watch his grandfather's face change from desperation to hope. He never forgot how different their house felt that night, knowing they could buy food, knowing they could pay the rent. And Willie never forgot the lesson that stranger taught him. When you have more than you need, you find someone who needs more than they have. That night, 7-year-old Willie made a promise to himself. Someday, when he had money, he would be that stranger for other families. He would show up at doors with envelopes of cash. He would change lives without asking for credit. But Willie's own journey to prosperity would take decades, and it would be marked by its own struggles and setbacks. By 1962, Willie had written some successful songs, but he was still far from wealthy. He'd sold Crazy to Patsy Cline, Hello Walls to Farron Young, and Nightlife to Ray Price. But songwriting royalties came slowly, and Willie was still playing small clubs for small money. That's when he met Martha Sullivan. Martha was a waitress at a diner in Nashville where Willie often ate cheap meals. She was a single mother with 2 kids, working double shifts to make ends meet. Willie watched her for weeks, noticed how tired she looked, how she sometimes didn't eat during her breaks because she was saving money. One night, Willie asked her about her situation. "It's not your problem, Mr. Nelson," Martha said. "I'm managing." But Willie could see she wasn't managing. Her shoes had holes. Her kids' clothes were too small. Her car was held together with prayer and duct tape. The next morning, Willie went to the bank and withdrew $500, about half of what he had in his account. He put the money in an envelope and left it on Martha's windshield with a note. "For the kids, from a friend." Martha tried to find out who had left the money, but Willie never admitted it was him. He just smiled when she thanked whoever it was in front of him. That was the beginning of Willie's secret charity. Over the next 50 years, as his fame and wealth grew, so did his giving. But Willie had rules about his charity that he never broke. Never give your name, never seek recognition, never tell anyone else about it. Always give more than you think you can afford. Always follow up to make sure the help actually helped. By the 1970s, Willie Nelson was becoming a major star. The outlaw country movement had made him wealthy, and with wealth came opportunities to help more people. But Willie didn't set up a foundation. He didn't hire charity managers. He didn't throw fundraising galas. Instead, Willie developed a network of friends, contacts, and acquaintances who would quietly let him know when someone needed help. A pastor might call to say a family in his congregation was facing eviction. A social worker might mention a veteran who couldn't afford his medication. A schoolteacher might talk about a student whose family had lost their job. Willie would listen, ask a few questions, and then act. In 1978, Willie learned about the Rodriguez family in Austin. Manuel Rodriguez was a construction worker who had been injured on the job. His insurance was fighting his claim. He couldn't work, and the family was 3 months behind on their mortgage. Willie drove to their house on a Sunday evening. When Manuel answered the door, Willie introduced himself simply as a friend who heard you might need some help. He handed Manuel an envelope containing $15,000 in cash, enough to catch up on the mortgage, cover medical expenses, and give the family time to get back on their feet. "Sir, I can't accept this," Manuel said. "I don't even know who you are." Willie smiled. "That's the point. Sometimes help comes from strangers. Sometimes kindness doesn't need a name. How can I ever repay you? When you're back on your feet and you meet someone who's in the situation you're in right now, you help them. That's how you repay me." The Rodriguez family kept their house. Manuel recovered from his injury. And 5 years later, Manuel started a small fund at his church to help other families facing financial emergencies. Willie heard about the fund and quietly donated $50,000 to get it started properly. By the 1980s, Willie's secret charity had become a sophisticated operation, though Willie was the only one who knew the full scope of it. He had contacts in hospitals who would alert him to families facing massive medical bills. He had friends in school districts who knew which kids were going hungry. He had connections in veterans organizations who could identify former soldiers struggling with PTSD, addiction, or homelessness. Willie's usual method was simple but effective. He would learn about a situation, research it quietly to make sure it was legitimate, and then show up with cash. Always cash. Never checks that could be traced back to him. In 1983, Willie learned about Sarah and David Chen, a young couple in Dallas whose premature baby needed heart surgery that would cost $300,000. Their insurance would only cover half, and they were facing bankruptcy trying to save their child's life. Willie called the hospital, spoke to the billing department, and paid the entire remaining balance anonymously. When the hospital staff tried to find out who had made the payment, they were told only that it came from a guardian angel who wishes to remain unnamed. The Chen baby survived and grew up healthy. Sarah and David never knew that Willie Nelson had saved their family from financial ruin, but Willie knew, and that was enough for him. In 1987, Willie heard about a different kind of crisis. A small town in Oklahoma was facing economic collapse after their only major employer, a manufacturing plant, had closed down. Nearly 40% of the town's residents were suddenly unemployed. Willie couldn't solve the town's employment problem, but he could address the immediate crisis. Working through a lawyer to maintain his anonymity, Willie bought $200,000 worth of groceries and had them delivered to the town's food bank. He also paid the electric bills for every family in town for 3 months, giving them time to find new work or relocate. The town never knew that Willie Nelson had basically kept them fed and their lights on during their darkest period. The pattern continued for decades. Willie would hear about a crisis, investigate quietly, and then provide help anonymously. A veteran who couldn't afford prosthetic legs after losing them in Vietnam found a check for $75,000 waiting for him at the VA office. A single mother whose house had burned down with no insurance found an envelope on her hotel room door with $50,000 and a note saying, "Start over. You've got this." A family farmer in Iowa who was losing his land to medical debt discovered that someone had paid off his entire loan with the bank. A homeless shelter in Austin that was about to close for lack of funding received an anonymous donation of $250,000. Willie's giving wasn't random or haphazard. He had criteria. He preferred helping families over individuals, children over adults, veterans over civilians, and rural families over urban ones. But his biggest priority was helping people who reminded him of his own family during the Depression. Hard-working people who had been hit by circumstances beyond their control. People who needed a hand up, not a handout. Willie estimated that he was giving away about 40% of his income to his secret charity. His accountants thought he was making poor investment decisions. His business managers couldn't figure out where all his money was going. Willie let them wonder. In 1990, when Willie himself faced the IRS crisis that nearly destroyed him financially, friends and business associates couldn't understand why he didn't have more money saved up. "Willie's been making millions for years," they said. "Where did it all go?" Only Willie knew the answer. It had gone to hundreds of families across America who had needed it more than he did. Even during his own financial crisis, Willie continued giving. He might not have been able to give as much, but he never stopped completely. In 1993, while he was still paying off his IRS debt, Willie learned about a family in Tennessee whose teenage daughter had leukemia. The treatment was experimental and expensive, and the family's insurance wouldn't cover it. Willie, who at the time was performing extra concerts just to pay his own bills, somehow found $100,000 to pay for the girl's treatment. She recovered completely and went on to become a pediatric nurse. By the 2000s, Willie Nelson was in his 70s, but his charitable giving hadn't slowed down. If anything, it had increased. With his IRS troubles behind him and his career still going strong, Willie was giving away more money than ever. But he was also getting older, and he was starting to think about what would happen to his secret charity when he was gone. That's where Robert Mitchell comes in. Robert Mitchell was Willie's accountant for over 20 years. He handled Willie's business finances, his taxes, his investments, but more importantly, Robert was the only person other than Willie who knew the full scope of Willie's charitable giving. Robert wasn't just an accountant, he was Willie's accomplice. When Willie wanted to give money anonymously, Robert figured out how to do it without leaving a trail. When Willie wanted to check on families he'd helped years earlier, Robert did the detective work. Robert knew about every envelope of cash, every anonymous payment, every secret donation. He kept records that Willie himself didn't keep, partly for tax purposes, but mostly because he was amazed by what he was witnessing. Over their 20-year partnership, Robert calculated that Willie Nelson had given away over $50 million to individuals and families in need. $50 million in secret charity. Money given without recognition, without tax benefits in many cases, without any expectation of return. In 2018, Robert Mitchell was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave him 3 months to live. As Robert was getting his affairs in order, he realized that he was the only person who knew the full story of Willie's generosity. When Robert died, that knowledge would die with him. But Robert also knew that Willie would never want the story told. Willie's whole philosophy about charity was that it should be anonymous, that good deeds should be done in private. Robert struggled with what to do. Should he take Willie's secret to the grave? Or did the world deserve to know about the incredible generosity they had witnessed for half a century? Finally, Robert made a decision. He would write a letter to be opened after Willie's death, documenting everything he knew about Willie's charitable giving. The letter would be given to Willie's family, and they could decide whether to make it public. But as Robert got sicker, he began to worry that the letter wouldn't be enough. He began to feel that Willie's story was too important to wait. In his final weeks, Robert called a reporter from the Austin American-Statesman. He didn't give Willie's name initially. He just said he had information about a major celebrity who had been secretly giving away millions of dollars for decades. The reporter was skeptical. Celebrity charity stories were common, and they were usually exaggerated. But Robert had documentation. Bank records, receipts, correspondence, evidence of a charitable operation that was massive in scope and completely secret. Finally, Robert revealed that he was talking about Willie Nelson. The reporter was stunned. Willie Nelson was known for his activism and his benefit concerts like Farm Aid, but this was something entirely different. This was personal charity on a scale that few celebrities ever achieved, even publicly. Robert was interviewed extensively over a period of 2 weeks. He provided names, dates, amounts, and stories. The picture that emerged was of a man who had spent his entire adult life quietly taking care of anyone who needed help. The article was scheduled to run on a Sunday, but on the Friday before publication, Robert Mitchell died. The reporter faced an ethical dilemma. Robert had given permission to publish the story, but he hadn't had a chance to review the final article. and Willie Nelson didn't even know the story was being written. The reporter decided to contact Willie directly. When Willie heard about the article, his first reaction was anger. "Robert had no right to tell those stories," he said. "Those families trusted me to keep their business private." But as the reporter explained what Robert had told him, Willie's anger softened. "Robert said something that stuck with me," the reporter told Willie. "He said that you had shown America what real charity looks like, but nobody knew about it. He said that in a time when people are losing faith in human goodness, your story could restore that faith." Willie was quiet for a long time. "What exactly did Robert tell you?" Willie asked. The reporter read some of Robert's quotes. "Willie Nelson didn't give money to get tax breaks or recognition. He gave money because he couldn't sleep knowing people were suffering when he had the power to help them. I watched Willie give away his last $10,000 during his own financial crisis because a family was about to lose their house. Willie didn't just give money. He followed up. He made sure the help actually helped. He cared about the results, not the recognition. In 20 years of handling his finances, I never once saw Willie hesitate when someone needed help. The only question he ever asked was, 'How much do they need?'" Willie listened to these quotes, and when the reporter finished, Willie was crying. "Robert understood," Willie said finally. "He understood what I was trying to do." After a long conversation, Willie agreed to let the story be published with some conditions. The names of the families he had helped would be changed or omitted to protect their privacy, and the focus would be on the principles of charity, not on Willie himself as some kind of saint. The article ran on Sunday, December 9th, 2018. It was titled, "The Secret Life of Willie Nelson, America's Anonymous Angel." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the story had been shared millions of times on social media. News outlets across the country picked it up. Television networks wanted to interview Willie, but the response that mattered most to Willie came from the families he had helped. Sarah Chen, whose baby's heart surgery Willie had paid for 35 years earlier, called the newspaper. "I always wondered who our guardian angel was," she said through tears. "Now I know. And I want Willie Nelson to know that our son grew up to be a doctor. He spent his career helping children with heart problems, just like Willie helped him." Manuel Rodriguez, the construction worker whose mortgage Willie had saved in 1978, drove from Austin to Willie's ranch to thank him in person. "You changed my whole family's life," he told Willie. "My kids went to college. My grandkids have opportunities I never dreamed of, all because you believed we were worth saving." The veteran who had received prosthetic legs tracked down Willie's phone number. "I ran in 3 marathons with the legs you bought me," he said. "Every step I took, I wondered who had given me the chance to walk again. I've been wanting to say thank you for 15 years. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from Martha Sullivan, the waitress from Nashville who had been one of Willie's first charity recipients back in 1962. Martha was 89 years old in 2018, living in a retirement home in Tennessee. When she saw the newspaper article, she recognized the story about the mysterious envelope of money. She called the retirement home's activities director and dictated a letter to Willie. "Dear Willie, I'm the waitress from Nashville who found $500 on her windshield 56 years ago. You probably don't remember me, but I never forgot what you did. That money didn't just pay my bills. It gave me hope at a time when I didn't have any. It showed me that there were good people in the world who cared about strangers. I used that money to get my car fixed so I could work more hours. I saved every extra penny until I could afford to go back to school. I became a nurse and spent 40 years taking care of people. I always told my patients that kindness from strangers had made my career possible. I wanted you to know that your $500 became a lifetime of caring for others. That's what real charity does. It doesn't just solve one problem. It creates a ripple effect that lasts for generations." Willie kept that letter in his wallet for the rest of his life. The revelation of Willie's secret charity had unexpected consequences. Donations to charities across America spiked as people were inspired by Willie's example. The phrase, "Willie Nelson it," became slang for giving anonymously. But more importantly, Willie's story changed how Americans thought about celebrity and charity. Here was a man who could have gotten publicity and tax benefits for his giving, but who chose secrecy instead. Here was proof that genuine generosity still existed. Robert Mitchell's death had revealed Willie's secret, but it had also revealed something bigger, that real heroism doesn't require recognition, that the best acts of kindness are often the ones nobody knows about. In interviews after the story broke, Willie was asked why he had kept his charity secret for so long. "Because it wasn't about me," Willie said. "When you're helping someone, the moment you make it about yourself, it stops being charity and starts being publicity." Those families didn't need publicity. They needed help. "But don't you think your example could have inspired others to give?" Willie smiled. "If my example inspires people to give now, that's wonderful. But for 50 years, the most important thing was that families got the help they needed. Everything else was secondary." Willie was also asked about Robert Mitchell and his decision to reveal the secret. "Robert was dying," Willie said. "He knew that when he was gone, there would be nobody left who knew the whole story. And I think he believed the story was bigger than my desire for privacy. Maybe he was right." The reporter who had broken the story wrote a follow-up article a year later. In it, he revealed that after Willie's charity became public knowledge, Willie had started receiving letters from people asking for help. Instead of being overwhelmed, Willie had hired 2 assistants to help him respond to the requests. His public charity was now almost as extensive as his secret charity had been. "The cat's out of the bag," Willie told the reporter. "Might as well make the most of it." But Willie's new public charity operated on the same principles as his secret charity had. Help families first, prioritize children and veterans, focus on people facing circumstances beyond their control. The only difference was that now other people could join Willie in helping. By 2020, Willie's example had inspired the creation of dozens of Willie funds across America, anonymous charity funds that operated on Willie's principles. Donors could contribute without recognition, and recipients received help without having to tell their stories publicly. Willie's childhood promise to be like the stranger who had helped his family had grown into a movement that was helping thousands of families across America. But Willie himself remained focused on the individual stories, the one-on-one moments of helping someone in crisis. In 2021, at age 88, Willie was still personally delivering envelopes of cash to families in need. His assistants would do the research and make the arrangements, but Willie insisted on making the deliveries himself whenever possible. "It's not about the money," Willie explained. "It's about showing someone that they matter, that someone cares enough to show up at their door. You can't get that from a wire transfer or a check in the mail." The legacy of Willie's secret charity extends far beyond the families he helped directly. It's changed how Americans think about giving, about celebrity, about what it means to use success responsibly. But perhaps the most fitting tribute to Willie's generosity came from his granddaughter, who wrote in her college application essay, "My grandfather taught me that the best way to change the world is to help one person at a time, and to do it so quietly that nobody notices except the person you helped. He showed me that real power isn't about how many people know your name. It's about how many lives you improve when nobody's watching." Willie Nelson's secret charity revealed something beautiful about human nature, that genuine kindness still exists, that success can be used responsibly, and that the best heroes are often the ones we never hear about. Robert Mitchell's revelation didn't just expose Willie's secret. It reminded America that there are still people in this world who do good things simply because they're the right things to do. And maybe, in a time when kindness seems rare and genuine generosity seems extinct, that's the most important revelation of all. Willie Nelson didn't set out to be America's anonymous angel. He just set out to keep a promise he made when he was 7 years old and hungry. But in keeping that promise for over 50 years, Willie proved that one person's generosity can touch thousands of lives, that kindness multiplies when it's genuine, and that the best charity is the kind that changes lives without taking credit. That's the real story of Willie Nelson's secret. Not how much money he gave away, but how many hearts he touched by giving it quietly, consistently, and without expecting anything in return.